Hey, hello, Mathilde. It's so
Hello.
nice to be with you today. Happy to be with you. When I was thinking about my Let's Self-Care Together series and about professional self-care, you came to my mind right away because you're a career and leadership coach, and I love you. So I want to have you on this series. So I would like you to introduce yourself first, and we'll get in our topic.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, as you said, I'm Mattie, first of all. My French name is Mathilde, but most people know me as Mattie. I'm a career and leadership coach. I'm also a positive psychology practitioner. So I feel like happiness and topic of happiness in general is closely related to careers in this day and age. And I'm also the founder of Zest Ambition. And I'm really, really excited to be here with you today and to talk about this topic, because I feel like professional self-care is one of the things that come back the most in the coaching sessions that I have with my clients. And I help clients that, experience anything from just a lack of motivation to go to work, to experiencing different levels of stress. And it can also go up until the point of feeling burnout. And one thing that's interesting as well that comes up more and more is the concept of work addiction. It's not something that people don't necessarily say, oh, I'm addicted to work, but it's the addictive behaviors that they display that, for instance, like compulsively checking your emails or, working past working hours without any good reasons to do it. And so all of these things makes it really important for us to be talking about professional self-care, because we are facing a significant amount of social and emotional pressure in the world of work. There's a lot more competition than there was years ago, because the competition is at a global level as opposed to a local level now. And there's also this trend that our work identity is merged in a way with our personal identity. And so there is this natural pressure that we have to have a narrative that impresses others, when we talk about our work. And so that naturally creates a lot of pressure. And that's where professional self-care comes into place. So I'm excited to be talking about that with you today, Gaelle.
And me too, because it's a very sensitive topic also for me, but personally, as I've been neglecting my self-care when I was working in the corporate world the past years, and it's really now something I'm very sensitive to, and I think it's really important to maintain your balance, to keep in mind this self-care practice at work too. It's not only on your personal time, but also at work. So let's dig in. And so Mathilde, could you maybe tell us what are for you the core pillars of professional self-care?
Yeah, sure. So I see professional self-care as simply like actions that we take in favor of our well-being, specifically in our work environment. And I think with that in mind, those actions, they don't have to be big or small, but there's pillars that I've noticed through the work that I've done with my clients that come back systematically when we talk about professional self-care. I think the first one, and it's one that's interesting because most people, is self-awareness. And most people think that they are self-aware, I was one to think that I know myself pretty well. I'm a pretty good judge of character. I can react well in social situations, etc. But in reality, there's a lot of little signals that our body, our emotions, our brain try to give us on a daily basis. And those are messages that are trying to communicate, and we don't often take the time to listen to them because we just operate on autopilot, because it's a much easier way to live than when we actually make the effort to do something new. So self-awareness is the first pillar. The second one is boundaries. And boundaries in our personal life is not necessarily easy, but at work, it's, I would say, even more complicated, because we're almost taught to be, pleasing people around us at work so that we can have positive relationships, so that we can get promoted, so that we don't get fired. So there's a lot of pressure that comes with having a job that involves, or that almost pushes us to say yes yes, I'll do more. Yes, I'll achieve more. Yes. And that has a direct impact on our well-being. So self-awareness, boundary setting. The third one is focus and mindset. And I think this is one that is probably almost the most important, because our internal world is going to have a direct impact on our external reality. So I think talking about, I mean, we can come back to that, but positivity, again, our brain is taught or has a natural tendency to focus on negative things, complaining, worrying. We can go into more details about that, but these are natural behaviors for us to showcase in the work environment. And so rewiring how our neurons are firing almost in our brains is completely possible. It's not difficult, but it's not something that we are trained to do. You know, we never taught us at school how to rewire our brains to think positively, or to think in a way that's going to give us self-confidence. That's not something that is taught in any schools, really.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah, exactly. So this is really important, to learn how to do that and have almost this toolkit that we can take with us anywhere we go in a professional world to help us. And the last one is relationships. And I think, again, I can talk about that in more details, but there's a lot of surveys that have proven the link between, or the role that relationships play in our health and happiness. And so it's important to notice the people that we're surrounding ourselves with and the impact that they have on our well-being. So these are the 4 pillars: self-awareness, boundary setting, focus and mindset, and relationships.
Okay, that's wonderful. So now we have our foundation and we know what to work on. Maybe we can take each of these pillars, and Mattie, maybe you can walk us through maybe 1, 2, 3 habits or actions we can take that can help us to improve our professional self-care in all these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So well, let's start with self-awareness, because self-awareness is actually almost, I would say, the easiest one to implement, because it doesn't require anything but just a mental pause. A lot of people think that, oh yeah, I have to journal for an hour every day, or I have to meditate, you can do all of these things, and they have been proven to have a positive impact on your well-being as well. However, if you're someone really busy, constantly running around, and you can just take a few mental pauses at different points throughout the day in order to check in on your energy level. And you can think about this on a scale. I do this with myself regularly, actually. I ask myself, how's my energy level today, or at this point in time, on a scale of 1 to 10? And then if my energy level is down to 1 or 2 out of 5, or out of 10 even, I know I need to take action. I know it's a sign that I need to go out for a walk, I need to sit down and breathe, I need to plan for an early night, not out, or cancel my plans to go out if I'm planning to go out that evening. So that gives you almost like a quantitative reference to know that, okay, it's time to react, it's time to take actions to help your well-being, So I would say this, the mental pause. And then one thing that I like doing as well is at the end of my work day, and I call it the exit vestibule, which is just basically 5 minutes at the end of my work day, where I just stay in my exit vestibule before I enter my personal life again. And I just ask myself, okay, what were 2 or 3 good things that happened today? And sometimes days have been stressful, or I feel like I haven't progressed, or things haven't gone as planned, but there's always a little something that I've learned, or a little something that actually surprised me in a positive way. So taking that time to remember those moments also teaches our brain to think in a positive way. And the more we do it, the more natural it becomes for our brain to focus on positives rather than negatives.
Yeah, I love this idea, and I like it also particularly in the context where we are a lot of us are still working from home with COVID, and so it's also important to have this transition because you stay in this kind of same space in your house, your apartment, to have this mental transition from your work day to your personal life. So I think it has a lot of benefits to this habit to implement. I really like it.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's an easy one. Again, it's not something that takes a long time. You don't need to have a pen with you. You don't need to have your phone with you. It's just, I literally push my chair away from my desk and just take, it doesn't even have to be 5 minutes. Just take 1 minute to think about the good things. Yeah.
So that's what's for self-awareness. Any other tips you have for us in this area, or would like to move to the boundaries part?
We can move on to boundary setting if you want. So boundary setting, as I said, can feel quite uncomfortable in the workplace. It can feel like, you know, especially when, depending on our relationship to authority, it can feel inappropriate sometimes. But I think what's important to remember with setting a boundary is, one, you don't have to be mean or disrespectful in order to set a boundary. And then you can set boundaries for yourself, and you can set boundaries for others. And I think with boundaries for ourselves, it can be things that we don't even notice or pay attention to. But me, for instance, I used to work really long hours past my, you know, way past 6 p.m. when I was supposed to finish. And I didn't have a manager above my shoulders telling me to do it. So it wasn't a boundary and it wasn't necessarily even expected of me to work those long hours. So it wasn't a boundary that I needed to set with others. It was just a boundary that I needed to set with myself, reminding myself, okay, now it's time to spend time with my husband, as opposed to continue dedicating and giving more to my company. So to the company I was working for. So I think it's remembering what are the boundaries that you want to set for yourself, what are the boundaries that we want to set for others, and communicating them clearly, because people forget, right? So it's easier to set the boundary up front and to make it clear up front than when somebody has crossed the boundary to kind of reverse engineer to set that boundary afterwards and enforce it. You have to have an awkward conversation almost. So it's better to, and you know, things, I was talking about that with one of my clients this week. Even during the interview process for a job, or if you want to be an entrepreneur, when you create your business, there are questions that you can ask or conversations that you can open up in order that will give you an opportunity to set boundaries at this point in time. I'm not the kind of person who's going to work past 6 p.m. because I respect my private time and personal time is important so that I can feel productive when I'm at work. Those kind of conversations can be raised really early on, and they don't have to be like, I'm putting my manager aside to have a conversation and tell him that I don't want to work past 6 p.m. No, it can be in the middle of another conversation. But it's little comments here and there that will remind other people that these are the boundaries, these are my boundaries, and they are not to be crossed. And I think I wanted to share that today because a lot of people, including me before, was thinking that setting boundaries was this big thing where I was going to have an uncomfortable conversation. I was going to have to be mean. I was going to, not mean, but I was going to have to, it was going to be uncomfortable, and it doesn't have to be. That's my message today.
I totally agree with you, Mattie. I think boundaries are really important. And most of the time, we are the ones actually who are preventing ourselves from having boundaries because we put thoughts in the other person also that they sometimes do not have. So I would say, like with these boundaries, being totally comfortable with it, with your own boundaries, when you it's really clear for you and it's important for you, the person in front of you can see that and they're going to respect it. because sometimes we are kind of a bit like, oh, I'm gonna try, but I'm not sure. And if the other person can sense that, sometimes they will not respect our own boundaries because we don't feel super confident about them. So I would say there is also this work that we can do about really thinking a bit, having this time to reflect on what is really important for us in our life, and having clearly these priorities in mind, like our job matters and we want to be, performing at it. And but if your personal life matters too, it's important to keep that in mind, because it's helping to be really strong in your position with your own boundaries, and affirming them really with a lot of strength and confidence. So yeah, it's a good topic. And like you, I mean, in my career, I mean, I've been better in the past, in the past 10 years with that, because I learned from my first 15 years where I was not very good at setting these boundaries, and work will eat on my personal life a lot.
Yeah, no, and I think with boundaries as well is that it's a skill, and it's, as every skill, it just takes practice to get good at it. And what I do, and it's a stupid little tip, but I just practice internally. I practice the conversation in my head, and then I practice exactly what I want to say. And when I find the right opportunities throughout the day to say it, I don't even have to think about it, because it's already in my head, accessible, and I can just say it. And I think that has really changed my approach to boundaries, just practicing it, knowing what they are, first of all. So deciding in my head, okay, this is what I'm willing to give. This is the flexibility, because you have to have flexibility, of course. But this is non-negotiable, this is negotiable. And then I train myself to communicate it in my head. And when I find the opportunity, I jump on it.
That's a great tip. The rehearsal is really important. This mental prep is really helping you to show up with confidence, and so yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's remembering it's a skill, and like every skill, it just takes practice. So the more you practice, the more comfortable you get with it.
Okay. Oh, good. We are learning a lot here. So, and what about the mindset and the focus you've mentioned as one of the pillars?
Yeah, so with that, I want to, and I kind of, this is the merging of my positive psychology learnings and my coaching experience, I guess. But I realized through the experiences I have in the work environment, and also my conversations with clients, that there is a lot of complaining and a lot of worrying that's being done in any workplace in general, because it's so easy to complain, right? It gives us something to talk about with anyone and everyone. It's a way almost of building relationships in a workplace. Except that complaining, and I'll talk about complaining first, and then we can come back on the worrying. But complaining just kind of keeps our brain in, reinforces the negative bias that our brain has, right? To constantly focus on the negative and think negatively. And so I think, once again, when you get caught into, and I'm naturally quite a positive person, but I found myself caught into so many negative conversations at work that I started becoming a complainer myself. And I realized that it had a big impact on how I perceived my job, the company I was working for in general. And so it's about sometimes just removing yourself from those conversations, or even better, bringing it a twist and highlighting what's actually positive about it. And when you're doing conversation, when you're starting conversations around the workplace, or even if you're working from home, or if you're an entrepreneur, just if you're talking to your network in general, starting with the positive, starting with, instead of saying how are you, because when you say how are you, you open the door for someone to say, oh, I've been ill this week, or this happened to me, and it's generally not going to be a good thing. But instead of starting with how are you, start with what's been good for you this week. So you force the brain of the other person in front of you to think about something positive. And then naturally, over time, it just becomes more natural to talk about the positive than to talk about the negatives. And, sometimes it's not easy to quit your job and change. Or sometimes you've quit your job, but you still have a 3 months notice period until you can actually leave the company. And remembering that to focus on the positive as opposed to continue seeing the negative will make those 3 months a lot easier.
It will for sure change your experience of, these moments that can be positive or negative. Yeah, that's super important. And it's it's a big part of our coaching process. We are both coaches, and like the way we have this conversation with our clients, we are always going to the positive, and not in a naive way, but just to think about, sometimes it's what did I learn? How can I grow through that has been negative? It's finding ways actually to bring things to the positive side of it. And through this coaching also, you develop these habits actually of questioning yourself a different way and looking at the situation with a different perspective of that is giving you more energy, positive energy, instead of taking you down there in despair and darkness.
Absolutely. And it's the same with worrying. There's always colleagues, and I used to be a worrier. What's going to happen if this client doesn't sign up, and what's going to be the consequence of this and that. There's a lot of things in the work environment that we can't control. But we can control, we can set an intention to focus on what's present, what we have today. Because if we're constantly worrying about the future or the worst case scenarios, again, it takes our brains down to a negative place, and it doesn't help our happiness or health or well-being at all. So again, sometimes I do that. When I feel like I've got a lot coming up that with a lot of uncertainty, and this pandemic hasn't helped, by the way, because it's tripled the amount of uncertainty that we have to face. I just start my day by setting the intention to focus on the tasks at hand, what's coming up in my calendar for today, and try to be present with that, and to stop worrying about what's coming next. And I'm not saying that solves every problem. I'm just saying that it brings you a sense of inner peace and calm that can help you move forward without this feeling of stress and pressure constantly over your shoulders.
Mm-hmm. That's very important. I used to be anxiety was part of my life for so many years, and high anxiety led me to depression. So that's a topic I'm very sensitive to. And when I think it goes back also to the self-awareness, like when you see yourself starting worrying and going, over and over in circle on a topic, like noticing it and taking one step back, and maybe a breathing exercise can help, and just refocusing yourself and thinking about what can I do now that will help me get out of this loop of negative or worrying thoughts, and be more in the present and what I can act on now, and not let it go over and over, because by experience I know, if you give too much space, you have to acknowledge it, that's important, and see what's wrong, because maybe there is something you can act on now about it to remove the worry. Actually, it's one action you can take that will take care of it, but not let it eat your brain, and because it tends to take all the space. So that's really interesting to reconnect to this self-awareness of noticing it and thinking, is it what I want to experience now to go through this all this worry and anxiety, and it's helping. I know I come from that, so I know being able to take control of it by acknowledging it and having these techniques to keep it into control and going back to the present time and acting on what can be acted on now is really helpful.
Yeah, I think this feeling of being in control and putting ourselves back into the driver's seat is key, because it's so easy to, especially in the world of work, it's so easy to feel like we can't control any of it. My managers made this decision, the big boss has decided to make redundancies, and that's it, it's happening to me. But no, there's always a choice about how we react, and even how we decide to focus our brain and our thoughts on the moment to moment every day is going to have an impact on how we feel holistically in our life. So yeah, just bouncing back on this notion of control, it's definitely important.
Great. So let's move to our last pillar, a very interesting one, to the relationships.
Yeah, And relationships is an interesting one that I never really thought about much until I became, until I watched this TED talk from Robert Wardinger.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about I think the longest happiness survey that has been made on adults in the world. And it's a survey that has been run over 75 years, where they're basically following adults and asking them at the beginning, you know, when in their 20s or whatever, what they thought would make them happy. And then when they turn, you know, 80 years later or 75 years later, asking them what actually made you happy. And they realized that relationships were the common, you know, the commonality between all the people that had felt happy in their lives. They had strong relationships. They had people they could rely on. They had people that, you know, had their back, people that made them laugh. And I think it's not really something, I disconnected myself from my family, my friends, a couple of times in my career for work. You know, I moved abroad, and I wasn't particularly happy when I was abroad. And there was a sense that I was missing my family and friends, but I never really realized the importance of relationships on my well-being and on my happiness until I listened to that TED talk, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. When I removed myself from that to follow, you know, success, to follow work, to follow, I don't actually this is not a decision that's making me happier.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I think, oh yeah, on paper, I'm getting a better job. I'm going to live in an exciting country, in an exciting city with loads of opportunities to do anything and everything I want, really. So I think it's just taking, again, a pause to look at what's the state of our relationships and how can we build up stronger connections with the people around us, or with different people perhaps, to feel happier. And I think, again, being intentional about the relationships that we build and the people we choose to nurture in our network is really important for our well-being.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And at work too, it can be different company cultures about, you know, the relationship between your management, the employees. And some culture, I mean, and we are all different, of course, we have different expectations, but will work for us, and some won't, in the way the relationship are, you know, managed in this company. And I'm sure you did. I experienced it through companies where the type of management and the relationships they wanted to have with the employees what was not working for me, because I need, you know, deep connections and trust and sharing something a bit more than just working and producing together. But some companies will never highlight that, so it can be just some people, it's okay for some people, so for some people it doesn't work. So it's also, I think, when you in your career and the company you choose to work with, important to value that. What kind of relationship can you expect there, and is it gonna, you know, nurture you in the way you need it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we make career decisions in general, it's easy to be very rational about everything. Just look at the salary, the role. Am I getting more responsibilities? Am I getting more money? Am I reducing my commute time, or am I getting enough working from home days or holidays or whatever it might be? So these are all very rational points to consider when making a career decision. Relationship isn't always one that is intentionally considered, but it's often one that's going to make or break whether we are happy and satisfied with the job that we pick or not. So yeah, I think that's why I wanted to bring it up today, is to be more intentional about that kind of things.
It can really make a big difference. I have in mind a team I've been working with 20 years ago, and I was not super happy in my job. I was in sales. It was a high pressure. It was a software company. So it was not the right environment for me. Anxious as I was, it was not that. But the team I was working with, our manager was so good, and all the team was working together so well. It helped me in this context. It brought me a lot. I would never have been able to make it through the time I was there without them. But we are still, all of us, in touch 20 years later. And I stayed 1 year in this position because it was so strong. And I think we all love the manager we had at this time. We like each other very much. We are all very different, but it makes a big difference. And when you can have all of it, I mean, the relationship, the management you need, and the job that is really matching your own expectation and purposeful to you, it's when you get this dream, environment. In this case, I just had the team and the relationship there and not the rest, but it was huge already. And it was really important. I know for me, it's super important to share the culture, the values, to find people you can interact in a deeper way with. So yeah, great.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's not everything, but it's one of the big things that should almost be first on our list, and that's often last. So yeah, I can definitely relate to what you were just saying.
So Mattie, we've been through all our pillars that are important in our professional self-care. If you were to give us a few quick wins and actions we can take and focus on in the next days, weeks, as we are coming to the end of the year, so we start 2022 with new habits that will make us super healthy, energetic, happy, positive at work, what would be these quick wins?
Well, I think the biggest one that I can think of right now is the mental pause.
Okay.
And especially in the last quarter of the year, I know a lot of companies and a lot of people have big deadlines and big things that they want to achieve before the end of the year. And it gets busy, right? You've got Christmas coming up, you've got Halloween coming up, you've got all sort of events and social situations and events that you're going to have to attend that you wouldn't have to necessarily participate in the rest of the year. So it's all the more important in these busy times to take a few seconds throughout the day to take a pause and think, what's my energy level like? What's my emotional state like? And then once you become aware of that, then take a deep breath, go for a walk. Something small, it doesn't have to be big once again, but just bring it to your awareness so you can listen to these messages that your body and your brain are sending to yourself. So I think that's probably the quickest win that I can recommend, that mental pause. And then the 5 minutes at the end of the day, just to reflect on the positive that has happened. And you're going to we're probably all going to be meeting quite a few new people with attending all these events, and it's important when we start conversations to start them to open up on a positive and don't give the opportunity to other people to start complaining straight away. Help yourself but help others in the process as well. That's what I would say, the quick win.
I think there are great tips for us to hand this year the best possible way. I will add, because I was very sensitive to this topic you mentioned about the boundaries. If some of you feel like they have issue on boundaries, maybe just thinking about one that is important for you and one step you could take, just something you can do just to make this boundary clear with this particular situation, this particular person, with yourself, and just try one thing, and because one step at a time we build, as you say, it's something you can build. It's a skill, so it's just taking a first step and building from there. So you can, I think it's really important to create the life you want, to be able to have these boundaries, because there will be always pressure from the exterior world. And it's important, if you want to lead your life the way you want, to be able to stay strong and having your vision and your goals and whatever you want to experience in your life. So it's, I think, another very important topic you mentioned today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the practice and one step at a time is I think two tips that go hand in hand almost. Is keeping it easy first, because the first step that we take for anything new that we try to do, the first step is always the hardest. And Gaelle, you and I talked about that just recently, about
yes.
Anything new that we try to do in our career or in our personal life, it's hard the first time, but then the second and third time it becomes easier. So make the first step relatively easy, just to bounce back on what you
and there is so much to find when you get out of your comfort zone. I've been learning that the past year and a half in this new journey of entrepreneurship and coaching, and it really works this way, one step at a time. So yeah, that's a good thing, and the awareness is very important also. I would say that and when it comes to self-care, I think when we have this in mind and we bring it to our attention and as a focus, it's helping us actually to develop our self-awareness, because we have to be aware of our own needs, listen to ourselves. So it's all working together. Everything is connected. Oh, Mattie, it was so nice to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much. Is there one last thing you want to share before we end this talk together?
Yeah, I guess the big thing is to remember that it's nobody else's job to look after your well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be the one taking those steps towards self-care, because your parents, obviously when you're a child, your parents will look after you, but as an adult, you have to be the one looking after yourself, because your manager, especially in the work environment, or your colleagues or the big boss, they're not gonna, or your clients, they're not gonna care about your well-being more than you do. So once again, remember that it's your most important job almost to look after your well-being and create this awareness, because the solutions are going to be different for everyone. Maybe someone doesn't like to go out for a walk, but they like to go for a run. Maybe someone doesn't like deep breathing, but they like meditation. The solutions that work are going to be very different for everyone. The awareness is the one common element that we all need in order to be able to implement the solutions that work for us. So that's my last message, I guess.
And that's a great message. I love it. I'm all about it. I share that with you. Okay, wonderful, Mattie. Thank you so much for being with us. And so let's self-care together is my motto for this year. And so I hope everybody learned a lot and will feel energized and motivated to take their professional self-care in their hands and go with new actions. So I will see you soon, Mattie, and thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.